Broadcasting from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, it's time for Executive Perspective. Executive Perspective is brought to you by Cressa, going beyond space to foster the best environment for every business. Now, here's your host, Danny Vander Maten.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Executive Perspective, Cressa Atlanta's podcast series. Thank you for clicking the link today, everybody. This is our first recording, and I am Danny Vander Maten, your host. And today, as my guest, I've got Ryan Northington, Chief Executive Officer of Simplus. Ryan, I can't be happier than to have you as the first guest and to help us really kick this off.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Danny. Really excited about the episode and the conversation.
Yeah, it's funny doing this with a microphone in front of me because I feel like it's over a beer, it's over a coffee, it's over lunch. So I'm just going to do my best. And hopefully you can too, to just pretend we're not wearing these things or talking in this.
Absolutely. I mean, it's only a little bit before noon, but we can pretend we have a beer right here in front of us, and let's just roll with it.
Okay. Well, can you just start off by maybe telling us a little bit about Simplus and the value that Simplus brings to clients that you serve?
Yeah, so we're a Salt Lake City-based systems integrator for Salesforce.com. So Salesforce is a CRM-based cloud application used by most every major enterprise in the world. They're about a $31 billion company, about $185 billion market cap, and they're very well known. And we are an implementer of Salesforce. So companies, once they buy the licenses, they buy the software, they need someone to help them set that up, right? Configure it, develop it. Every business is slightly different, how they manage opportunities, how they manage their warranties, how they manage their customer service, their inbound marketing lead flow, and the ability to customize the solution to match, how that particular company operates. That's where we come in, right? So we're a Salt Lake City-based Salesforce implementation partner, and we specialize specifically with, large multi-cloud. Multi-cloud means multi-product. Salesforce has a lot of products. The ability to just implement beyond just your core sales, opportunity management, lead management is very important. One of the reasons why Salesforce has grown to $31 billion is because they have dozens of products that these enterprises can purchase and use. But we got our start by being a implementer of what's called CPQ, which is configuration, price, and quoting. And it's the art of taking a complex set of products. Say you're buying a computer. And when you buy a computer, you want to spec out the memory, the hard drive space, the keyboard, the color, the type of monitor, that's the configuration part. And then when you've configured the thing that you want, it obviously spits out a price for you that you can then act on in the form of a quote, right? So that entire life cycle is how we got our start, because we specialized in being able to stand up that specific business process on Salesforce. And then, that was 7-8 years ago. And since then, we've obviously expanded to be able to develop and service the entire Salesforce product suite. And most of our clients are very well-known large enterprise brands these days. So, and that journey took about, 7, 8, 9 years
Gotcha.
Since the inception.
And you said you guys are based in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
But you're a global company.
We are a global company. So we are actually a part of the Infosys family. So Infosys is a large global systems integrator headquartered out of Bangalore, India, and they acquired Simplus in March of 2020. So we were just here on our 3-year anniversary of that acquisition, and we became
happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. It's been an exciting ride so far, and we are now part of a global organization with a global presence. And so we have operations out of EMEA, headquartered out of Helsinki, Finland. We have Simplus is specifically responsible for all of North America Salesforce implementation and services, as well as I am responsible for Australia and New Zealand. So we have a decent sized team down there, and we service that go-to-market region as well, with offices obviously in India because of the parent company, as well as our own Simplus branded offices in the Philippines.
Gotcha. And around the time you guys rolled up and the acquisition happened with Infosys, that was about the time that you took on this role, or it was not too soon before,
Close
right?
to it. I did get a new role. So I'm not a founder of the company. It was founded by two brothers based out of Salt Lake City, which is why we're headquartered there. And then when we got acquired by Infosys, I took on a new role to essentially manage the North America region. So I was responsible for all of our service delivery resources, the people that are actually configuring the software, doing the work for the client, generating the revenue, as well as our sales organization in North America. And then, the founders were pure entrepreneurs. And so, a couple of years into the acquisition, it was time for them to move on and go, back and think about potentially starting something else. So that's when I took on the job of running the company. So that was a little over a year ago when that conversation happened.
Well, happy almost year anniversary to your new post.
Thank you. It's been certainly a learning experience, and I'm very excited and blessed to have been given the opportunity.
And I can remember when that was happening and when that was something that was an opportunity that you saw was going to be there for you. What were some of the first things that were running through your head when you saw you taking on this new post as an opportunity that was going to be there for you?
Yeah,
because in I preface that with you're a young CEO, and this is a really large company. And curiously, what does that come with when you're thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be something that's offered to me. What do I need to take into consideration?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple ways to take that. One is that as I had progressed in my career, I observed this, phenomenon. As you go from sort of a single threaded role, right? I'm a project manager managing a project. You really have one responsibility, but then you go and you manage, a region or a department or, a whole service line. The skill set to be able to differentiate the different problems you have to deal with on a daily basis, that's a real skill set, right? To be able to jump from an escalation to a budget meeting to a, salary negotiation to, there's half a dozen of them. And as you move up, those domains that you then have to spread your mind share across just increases, right? And so the CEO job for any CEO, that is the maximum amount of domains that you have to manage, right? You're managing everything from finance to marketing to sales, strategy, day-to-day execution, operations, et cetera, et cetera. And so, going from where I was before, just managing a region, both the delivery and the sales organization, to now running the entire company and managing not just day-to-day operations, but managing up to the new finance department, the board of directors, right? Talking about the 5-year strategy versus just the quarterly execution. All that stuff, created the energy drain on switching your brain from domain to domain, as you go through the day is real, right? You may have a very difficult conversation in the morning that puts you on full alert, but then you have to go right into sort of the more fluffy rah-rah type of stuff where, like this morning, I kicked off a manager training, right? So right before that, I had a fairly difficult salary negotiation that, I was working on. And so going from that to I'm trying to build everybody up and be very positive and changing not just, the problem solving part of my mind, but also the emotional part of my mind, going from being very alert and being somewhat, stern in the negotiation process to very optimistic, how do I, motivate these folks that what they're doing in this training is really powerful. That was something I knew was going to happen, but I wasn't fully prepared for the energy drain that comes with just having to switch within a single day, the types of conversations and where your headspace has to be in order to be successful in each of those individual conversations.
It sounds like you've had to grow accustomed to having to pivot, through these task-based things that happen through the day, as well as just emotionally yourself.
Sure.
To guide and lead.
And I've gotten used to it. It's just like working out or running or anything like that. When you're used to a certain level of physical activity, and then you decide to change that or increase the intensity, or say I'm going to go from a marathon runner to a sprinter. It takes a while for your body to acclimate to that new stress, and so it's no different in this instance either. Suffice
to say that in this last year, you've kind of grown to where you are now in peak emotional shape, right?
I don't know if I'd say that, but I've certainly acclimated.
Yeah,
I've certainly acclimated. But there are still days where I get to the end of the day, I'm just, it's exhausting, right? Even though I've done nothing but sit and be on the phone for all day. Seemingly,
especially just leading a global company and operating in so many different time zones.
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly challenging too. But that you also sort of get used to, and if you spend some time on it, obviously one thing I took into account was, the family life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I took this job about a year ago, been married for, a little over 10 years. I have 2 young kids, 6 and 4. And so, what was this going to do to that relationship, that part of my life? And, you have to sort of manage around it. And so you get sort of used to, setting guardrails and boundaries, both with your spouse and with your kids and with yourself too. So for example, if I will typically shut off at about somewhere between 5 and 6 in the afternoon, just so I can come in, give my wife a break. I can have dinner with the family, and knowing that it's sometimes, not every night, but it's possible that after about 9 p.m., kids are in bed, everything's settled, dishes are done. I may have to go back out for a phone call or two, right?
Right.
Somebody else, but that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, right? And so you just have to sort of set those boundaries, that protected time between, 5 and 9 p.m., nothing's going to interrupt that, right? Unless something extreme is happening, obviously, but you sort of create those boundaries and those guardrails, and that keeps you somewhat grounded.
Yeah. And so tell us about what initially brought you to Simplus, or the organization that Simplus was.
Sure.
Before you guys became an Infosys company.
Sure. So Simplus was really small when I joined. There were less than 50 people.
And this was how many years ago?
This would have been early 2017.
Okay.
Early 2017. So it's about six years ago. They were really small when I joined, and they were a proper startup. They were a little company. They had a very charismatic set of founders. They were looking to grow aggressively, right, and grow very fast. They had taken some venture capital money, some from Salesforce, some from other venture capital firms. Some in Salt Lake City, some in other places, and they were really looking to deploy that capital, right, to maximize their growth over the coming years. And they were on a 4, 5, 6, 7 sort of plan, before they were looking for some sort of liquidity event, right? Could be a big raise by a PE firm, could have been an acquisition, which ended up happening with Infosys, obviously. So I became a candidate for someone they wanted to bring into the organization. I had just done what they were doing before at a company called Cloud Sherpas, which is actually Atlanta-based.
Cloud Sherpas.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that was a 5-year exercise at Cloud Sherpas. I was a manager running the service department, so I was somewhat close to the leadership layer, but I was not an executive or a senior leader at that company. And we grew at Cloud Sherpas, I think, from about $5-ish million to, somewhere close to $200 million in the span of that 5 years, 4 or 5
Oh, wow.
years. And it got acquired by Accenture, right, in 2015. So I had just gone through that journey that Simplus was then beginning to go on, right? Maybe not quite beginning, but they were still in the early stages. But they were going on the journey, and they didn't quite know how to get to the growth. They knew what they wanted to do to deploy the capital, and they just needed the folks to come in that had the knowledge to be able to build the operations, in order for them to be able to capitalize on that growth and consuming, what the market was demanding at that time, which is Salesforce services. Salesforce grows like crazy. As long as Salesforce is growing, the demand for services is intense, right? Especially from the enterprise. So I was at Accenture for 2 years. A colleague of mine at Cloud Sherpas had found his way to Simplus, and he said, "Hey, we don't have this thing. It's called managed services." That's what I had built at Cloud Sherpas. Essentially, it is once you implement Salesforce, you then have to support it, right? You have to enhance it. You have to operate it. That's managed services. And so I had built that offering at Cloud Sherpas. I was responsible for it. And this guy who had went to Simplus to say, "Hey, we're little, we're tiny, operations are good, but we're a mess as far as how do we grow this thing? We need managed services. Can I introduce you to the founders?" And so I got introduced to the 2 brothers. Their names were Ryan and Isaac. So flew out for an interview. Essentially just threw a bold statement out there. This is they had just done about a $5 million year. Their average deal size is about $35,000 per deal.
Okay.
And I came in and said,
$5 million deal. You
so
said
a $5 million in revenue.
$5 million in
annual
revenue. Okay. And the average size deal for managed
35
services was
for them. For their them. Before I came in, it was about $35,000.
Okay.
So I came in and I said, okay, well, my average deal size that I want to sell is $60-something thousand, and I think I can do $1 million in the first year.
How did that sound to them?
It sounded great to them. In the back of my head, I'm like, I really hope I can do that.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of skepticism was that met with? How did they receive that? And they knew what they were probably getting into when they were interviewing you, but
To be honest with you, I don't remember any skepticism.
Okay.
You know, if you get in front of a pure entrepreneur they live and breathe and that's in their bones, they are eternal optimists.
Yeah.
Right?
They say, hey, that sounds crazy enough. Let's bring it in.
They like crazy.
I'm crazy. He's crazy too. Let's get this together.
Big, hairy, audacious goals. That's what they live and die by. And so to them, that was great. You know, they just done $6 million organically. I can hire this person to come in and create another $1 million in revenue this next year. You know, that's a huge improvement because usually when you raise VC money, you know, you're deploying it to try and maybe drive increase in sales, increase in marketing, but a lot of it is used for acquisitions, you know, acquisition targets, and that's how you grow, or inorganic growth. In this instance, you know, organic growth, aka just hiring somebody and then them growing it because of the idea and the fact that they had done it before, you know, that was very, very viable to the company because I think by the time we exited, managed services had become 25% of the overall revenue.
Oh, wow.
They didn't have to acquire to get that.
And it was non-existent.
It was non-existent.
Prior to you coming on board.
Yeah, non-existent.
What are some funny experiences or just interesting stories about that early stage of you kind of coming on board there and saying, okay, we need to do this? I mean,
sure.
Was there a moment where you said, oh gosh, here's how I'm going to put it together? And I didn't see it going that way, but obviously you grew it to 25% of revenue.
Sure.
From 0 to 25%. What's a good example of something that contributed?
You know, contributed one is the fact that, you know, when you've done something before, right, it's a lot easier to do it a second time, right? Versus sort of, I'd fallen into all the holes, right? I had made a lot of mistakes. Probably still made some mistakes, right? At Simplus, but I made a ton before. So coming in, you know, I sort of knew the order of operations. I knew I had to create sales content. And I knew I had to do sales training. There were 6 salespeople at the time at Simplus, and so I had to get them enabled so that I can have them go to the market, you know, because they're the ones interacting with the clients. They're the ones, you know, looking at the leads, trying to qualify them, figure out what they can sell to them. I needed them to really believe in this thing, and so, you know, I left Accenture with a 100-person organization that was delivering managed services, and I came in with a 1-person organization, but I sold it like I was still 100 people large, right? So, you know, we had the ability to deliver out of the Philippines, which we did not have a Philippines office at the time when I joined.
But you saw the ability to.
I had made the assumption that we would be able to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so the assumptions became, it's a fake it till you make it, you know, sort of mentality. But the assumptions became something that we just said, well, the assumption, at least for a period of time, it's just going to become reality, right? And so there are some times I had an early employee. She was actually about to leave the organization. She was just a consultant at the time. I mean, she was just doing some work for clients, tactical work. And they said, well, she wants to leave. She might have trit, you know, but I told her to talk to you first before she made a decision. I talked to her and I said, come on over, right? I'm desperate for employees. It's just me right now, so I need someone. She was very personable, you know, very easy to talk to, and so I wanted her to be my first success manager. Success managers are the people that are here in the go-to-market region, in this case, just the United States, that manage the relationship with the client after we sold a managed services contract, and then we did all the work some of the work we do here, but a lot of the work we do over in the Philippines now, and so. You know, now we joke. Now she is responsible for almost a $10 million P&L, right?
Oh, wow.
Because she's been with us the whole time, and the managed services has grown since then. And so she's now managing a whole book of business, and she has her own CSMs that work for her, and all this kind of stuff. So that's a big success story. But either way, I remember we still reminisce because we look back and we're selling this thing like it's this big, massive, mature operation, but it was just me and her. And 3 contractors in India, because we didn't have the Philippines yet, so we were using offshore, you know, Indian contractors through this Indian contracting firm. And we would just walk into client meetings just, you know, as confident as you can expect, saying we can deliver this thing to all the expectations we just laid out. And we never really thought in that moment, we weren't ever really worried that we couldn't. Now in hindsight, we look back and be like, how on earth did we ever do that? Like that's just the scariest thing I've ever thought about.
It takes crazy, is what it sounds like.
Going in and making these commitments to a client, knowing that you have nothing to back that up except just pure grit, ambition, and these assumptions that we had made to say that we're going to assume that we can do these things, right? Even though we hadn't started doing them yet, we didn't know if we were going to be able to do them. We just assumed we could.
What was it like setting that up in the Philippines?
Well, I'd done business there before, and I had been going to the Philippines for twice a year for a handful of years at that point. So I was comfortable with the region, but I had never set anything up there. That operation already existed by the time I got involved in working with the Philippines. And so I remember going there with a couple of other Simplus leaders, and we had 1 week to set up an operation in the Philippines. I joined in March, and we officially opened the Philippine office July 1st, right? So, there was, 4-ish months of planning, 4 or 5 months of planning. And so we get there and we had to do real estate. We had to set up accounting. We had to get someone to help us with legal. We actually had to interview our first candidates and make actual offers all within a week, right? And so I remember going there, and a couple of stories stand out. One was looking for real estate. We hired a real estate agent, and she took us around to different buildings. And, what she showed us were, old abandoned office space. So we saw a lot of doctors' offices that were abandoned. We'd have to do a big build out. But I remember one of them, we were on the 11th floor. It was an old doctor's office space, and it very apocalyptic sort of, just all the equipment had just been left, right? Yeah. And it was dusty, and sort of things were falling over, and, very much, like Walking Dead, the guy wakes up for the first time in the hospital in the first episode. And we go into this office space. It was fine. And then we're leaving. Well, as we left, they said, well, there's an issue with the elevator. We have to take the stairs. So, okay, whatever. So
an issue with the elevator.
Yes. All the elevators. So we're walking down the stairs. We're on the 11th floor, so it's taking a while. And then the Filipinos are walking briskly, in some cases shuffling quite aggressively past us, and they're, in the Philippines, they speak Tagalog, but they weave it in with English. English is a really common language in the Philippines. A lot of customer service departments use the Philippines because their English skills are really, really good. So when they speak, though, they naturally speak both in Tagalog and English. They weave in and out. And so I didn't understand what they were saying, but I did pick up one of the words, which is fire. Right? But they were joking. They were smiling. They weren't running, but they were moving urgently. So I just assumed fire drill. This is just a fire drill. I've been in a fire drill before in the Philippines. You have to take the stairs all the way down.
Follow everybody's lead.
Exactly.
This is a chore.
So we just sort of mosey on down, shuffling. We get out of the building, and everyone's on the street just looking up. And so we get on the street, we look up, and there's just smoke pouring out of what seemed to be somewhere around the 11th floor, which is where we were, right?
Where you just were.
Yeah. So we just turned to our real estate agent. We're like, I think we'll go to the next office now.
And that sounds so ominous, but the dream persisted.
And kept on going.
You guys kept on going.
And, we ended up not actually choosing a full-time real estate office, or at least a full-time office. We ended up using co-working services, which worked well for us because we were, I think we started with 6 people. Now there's about 300 people there. But we knew we were going to have to grow aggressively. So let's start with co-working, let's grow, support for a couple of dozen people, and then we'll move to a permanent office, and by the time we were ready to have that conversation, COVID hit. So we never actually ended up doing a big lease.
So wow. Talk about biting off an experience you probably weren't anticipating, being thrown out of a burning building in the Philippines where you're trying to open up.
That was definitely one.
First time operations.
And we had another surprise too, is that, I had a good network there, and I had a lot of good relationships with folks and people that had left Accenture already, because I was with Accenture at the time. And, so I brought in, a handful of them. They'd already left, they moved on to other things and said, hey, we're starting something else new. And I'd worked with them enough that they were like, I'll take a chance. We'll have a conversation with you. So I was like, great. They ended up bringing another 10 to 15 people with them as recommendations and referrals. And so we were sitting in this hotel lobby, and we just had 30-minute after 30-minute interviews of all these people coming in, probably about 20 to 25 in a span of about a day.
Wow.
And we get to the end, and we selected 12, that we wanted to make offers to. And we wrote these offers up, and we sent them all out. We were so happy with ourselves. We had a drink, we had dinner, we were celebrating. And I get this text from the main person her name was Nikki. And the main person who I had sort of said, hey, we're coming to the Philippines. Can you help me, get some folks in to do interviews? And she said, you have to redo all of the offers. They're not very good.
Oh, wow.
We're like, what are you talking about? So she walked me through the expectations of when you're in the Philippines and you get an offer, there's all these allowances that are, secured by the government. You have to give as part of, some of them are required as part of the offer. Some of them are required. Some of them are optional, but a lot of companies give them to try and, again, they're
as
competing
an incentive.
with each other as an incentive. So for example, there's a rice allowance. You have to commit to providing 2 pounds of rice per month.
That's unique.
Yep. there's laundry, there's internet, there's a list of them, the minimus allowances. And then there was this concept of a 13-month pay. At the end of the year, it's pretty common, kind of like health insurance became really common, here in North America, is just you assume that it's part of a contract now when you go and work for a company.
Yeah.
There,
very much.
It was something that they had established, but had become so common that people just expected it, that at the end of the year, everyone gets a bonus equal to 1 month of their pay, and they call it the 13th month pay.
Oh, wow.
Right? We didn't have any of that in the offer letter. And so we became experts very quickly on Filipino employment law, rewrote all of the offers to what we thought were somewhat of a fair. We sent them to Nikki first and said, hey, is this language okay? Mm-hmm. And so she gave us a thumbs up. We sent them all out, and fortunately all 12 of them signed
awesome.
The next day. But that was also sort of we went from celebrating, having a drink, to multiple hours of intense, reading up on, how do we actually, get these people to kind of want to come and work for Simplus in a region we had never actually done this before. So two sort of intense stories that really stick out from that 1 week experience in the Philippines.
And suffice to say that these are experiences that have definitely stayed with you, and lessons learned contributed to your journey from back then through now.
Absolutely.
And maybe even this last year.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of the big lesson here is in some of those stories and other ones that have really sort of been on my mind is this concept of resilience, mm-hmm. right? There's a lot of business books. There's a lot of things that people have done. You get these speakers that post on LinkedIn all the time about this is their philosophy, and this is how you succeed in X, Y, and Z, and a lot of that's true. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, sometimes you're going to wake up and you're going to realize there's not a playbook for everything, right? And so your ability to be resilient in some of those situations is, again, a skill that you have to experience it in order for you to get good at it. Mm-hmm. Which means that there has to be some semblance of you being willing to sort of stay in the pocket during the difficult, unexpected situations, so you can actually get the lesson out of it. If you don't, then you'll never develop that skill of resilience and the ability to recognize that sometimes there's not a playbook, and you're going to have to sort of think on your feet.
I would agree with that. I would say that there are certain professional attributes that only experience can deliver.
100%.
And
100%.
In this last year, well, I guess back up, what would you tell yourself a year ago before you started on this particular path that you're on right now, becoming CEO?
I would probably just encourage myself to remember what I just talked about, mm-hmm. right? Because this has been a challenging year, for a lot of people, right? The economy, the market ups and downs. If you pay attention to what's going on, especially in the high tech sector, Salesforce has been in the news. They've been sort of under attack from various investors that are expecting higher profitability at the sacrifice of lower growth. Salesforce has made some really large acquisitions that some folks don't necessarily agree with the value of those acquisitions. And either way, Salesforce has been in the news a lot. Right. And when Salesforce is in turmoil, the rest of the ecosystem is in turmoil. Then you couple that with sort of the global macroeconomic cooling off, lethargic economy, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. That has created some really difficult times, especially as we all try and chase performance. We try and chase results that is, sort of expected of us, in the positions that we're in. So that's been something that, a little bit of encouragement and reminder for myself to just, again, stay in the pocket and be resilient, just to mentally prepare for that. It would have been something I probably would have said. Otherwise, it's, again, you have to pull the lesson out of all this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't mm-hmm. have changed what happened in the last year at all, just because it's, I think, provided a lot of important learnings for a lot of people, right? Especially new leaders. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. Honestly, Ryan, it's been a lot of fun doing this. First episode. All that's missing is a beer. So for what that's worth, let's just put this one on ice, and till next time, take care. Good night, America.
Thank you for joining us on Executive Perspective. This show is brought to you by Cressa, the world's largest occupier-centric commercial real estate firm offering unbiased, conflict-free advice. For more information, go to cressa.com.